Welcome, everyone. This is John Beathan with the Technology Advisory Committee at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce. And today is March 15th, 2022. And today, I think we're all really excited because we have a presentation by Dr. Mark Heckman, who is a professor of practice, which I kind of want to hear more about that, from the University of San Diego. And the title of this presentation he's giving is called Cyber Threats in an Internet of Things World. So Mark, feel free to tell us a little bit more about yourself, and you can share your screen anytime you want.
Okay. I've been working in the field of cybersecurity since 1984 is when I started. So a long time now. And I've seen the field change quite a bit in that time. But one of the things about cybersecurity, like computers in general, is that it's always changing. And then the things that I learned in the 80s don't always apply necessarily to the field today. And as a professor, I've been teaching at at various universities for about 8 years now. Every 6 months, I have to update my classes because the technology has changed, and the methods that attackers use change. The attack surface, the things there are to attack, change very rapidly. And Internet of Things is something relatively new. And it's 5 years ago, not everyone realized it was even a thing to worry about. And then all of a sudden we realized, oh no, we're making all the same mistakes with the Internet of Things that we made with the original Internet. So today I'm going to talk to you about what are those threats, what is the Internet of Things, why we should care about the Internet of Things, and what we can do about it. So let me start sharing my screen. And hopefully you should be looking at my slideshow.
Yep, we got it.
Good. Okay, so first, I always like to start my lectures with my students at the university with some security bad news, examples of current or recent attacks. So here's an example of an attack where a hacker took over the baby monitor in a private home and started and broadcast threats to the parents. I don't think the baby understood, thank goodness. So the hacker remotely was able to activate the camera in the parents' room and the speaker and shout at the baby and at the parents, which is extremely worrisome if you're the parent. Here's another example of security bad news. There are certain adult toys, shall we say, that are connected to an app on your cell phone, and turns out hackers were able to figure out how to remotely control these toys over the internet. That's pretty worrisome. Here's something that's more relevant to a small business. A casino had a lot of fish tanks to decorate the casino, and all of those fish tanks had thermometers that were internet connected, so that people could monitor the temperature in the fish tanks and detect if there was something wrong and save all the valuable fish. Well, hackers were able to hack the thermometers, and from there they could move around other areas of the casino network and steal the data or tamper with data potentially. So any small business that has internet connected devices has to worry about an attack of this type. So what do all these attacks have in common? A baby monitor, adult toys, or a fish tank thermometer? These are all examples of Internet of Things devices. These are all attacks on Internet of Things devices. So that's what I'm talking about today. What's the Internet of Things? Why is it so unsecure? Why does that matter? And then I will briefly touch on some proposals for Internet of Things security standards. The slides I have for these are more detailed than I really want to go into today, but they're there for your enlightenment if you really want to study them. And before I go any farther, I'll just say, if you have any questions, go ahead and fire out and ask them. Don't use the raise your hand icon or anything like that. It's a very small group, so feel free to just shout out your questions. So first thing, what is the Internet of Things? Well, these are literally billions of physical devices all around the world now. And what do they have in common? They all contain a computing device. They're all computers, essentially. And they're all connected to the internet, and they're all collecting and they're sharing data with each other and with various applications that we have. But this term, this Internet of Things device term, is not a well-defined term. It's kind of fuzzy. So usually, in general, we use the term Internet of Things to discuss, to talk about devices that we don't usually think have internet connections, but they do, like adult toys or baby monitors and so forth. So, for example, your computer that you're using to watch this presentation right now is generally not considered to be an Internet of Things device, even though it is connected to the internet. But internet connectivity is nevertheless key. So I don't know if you've heard about this law, California Senate Bill 327, which took effect in January of 2020. And it was the first law of its kind in the country to create a standard around that all Internet of Things devices had to meet. And they had a definition of what a connected device is under California State Bill 327. It meant any device or physical object capable of connecting to the internet. And it could be connected via the standard internet protocol, or it could be using Bluetooth, but it has to have some network connectivity.
Say, Mark, I do have a question. Does that include Teslas?
Teslas are very interesting. Automobiles are, I would call them part of the Internet of Things. Not everyone does, but Teslas are, but it's not just Teslas. All cars have have internet connectivity these days and are heavily networked. And I'll talk a little bit about attacks on cars later in the talk here, in fact, because that's such an important thing that's happening now. It's a big vulnerability we have. So, but these Internet of Things devices are not just in cars or in home baby monitor systems, but they're everywhere. The retail point of sale systems are Internet of Things devices. In the infrastructure for the power grid or water delivery systems, dams, for example, these all have Internet of Things devices. Factories, chemical plants, any kind of factory has Internet of Things devices. So it's in industrial, it's in healthcare. Someone here I know is working at a bio. I'm sorry, what was the company? Creating medical devices. So San Diego has a large a set of companies that are working in this field, biomedical device field, and those are Internet of Things devices. So it's everywhere now, and it's just exploding in terms of the number of devices that are internet connected that are computing devices. So, but all these Internet of Things devices they're just simple computers. I mean, there's really no distinction between your PC and your phone and the adult toy I mentioned earlier. They all have computers inside and they're connected to the internet. So that means these Internet of Things devices can have all the same vulnerabilities that any other type of computer can have. Where do these vulnerabilities come from? Well, we have poorly designed software or communications protocols, or we know there's a bug, but we failed to install a security patch, or we've just misconfigured our devices, allowing attackers a chance to break into them. Why does this happen? Because humans make mistakes. Humans are fallible, or humans have failed to correctly estimate the security risk, and therefore they've allocated inadequate resources to building and maintaining these systems to keep them secure. And one of the examples of failure to do provide adequate resources would be a lack of adequate developer training. So your developers don't know how to build their systems securely. So here's a set of fun facts that a bolt of lightning is about 6 times hotter than the sun. French fries were not developed in France, and almost no one actually cares about cybersecurity. And so we say, what are you talking about? We asked you here today to talk about cybersecurity. What do you mean no one cares? Well, what I mean is vendors, people who develop systems and sell them, they say they care about security, but when push comes to shove, it's not a high priority, because Cybersecurity is expensive. You have to train your developers. That costs money. It can take longer, a lot longer to develop a secure system. When I was when I first started out in the 80s, I was working for a company developing a secure operating system for sale to the Department of Defense. It took 10 years for that system to be completed and to be approved certified by the government. And it was one of the most secure systems ever developed in the world, in computer history. And it had really one major customer, and then the company went out of business. So that's the problem with developing secure systems. It didn't run Excel is the big problem. It didn't run Word, it didn't run Excel. So secure systems generally don't run all the software that you really like. Another problem with so-called secure systems is that it's really hard to measure security. How do you know how much resources you need? We don't have a standard. We don't have any measurement for security. And that's a whole nother talk about why that is. So what do vendors care about? Time to market. If you're, what's running on your phone? You probably have an Apple phone or a Android phone. Those are the two first to market. If I was to come out with a brand new secure phone that was the most secure phone in the world, it wouldn't have a very large market because it wouldn't run any of the apps that make your phone so convenient to use. So time to market, cost, and features are the vendor focus. Security is like, well, we'll fix it in version 2. Internet of Things devices are even worse off because they're meant to be cheap commodity devices. If someone's manufacturing a children's toy, they don't want to spend a lot of time worrying about making it secure. They just want to get it out there and sell it. So in time for Christmas. So IoT devices are cheap commodities. They have very fast development cycles with developers who have no training in security whatsoever. And security, if they think of it at all, is an afterthought. So
say, Mark, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Would you agree that with convenience in terms of technology comes a higher risk of security?
Absolutely. We have something called a notion called the attack surface, which is all the places a bad guy can touch a system and potentially break in. The more features you have in a system, the more convenient it is to use. Typically, the larger your attack surface, which is more things for the defenders have to look at or test. And there's lots of different facets to convenience. One is backward compatibility. If I want to run all my old Windows software on the latest Windows 11, well, all that old software has a lot of security problems, and it took advantage of flaws that already existed in Windows for convenience, for the convenience of the developers. So a lot of my old Windows software won't run anymore on the latest Windows, or it only works if I make a special security exception, which I won't do because it would really be ironic if the security guy gets hacked. So yes, convenience, features increase the risk. But here's something I want to make a personal observation, kind of because I'm in the education field right now, is that software is generally developed by people who have no training in security. Most programmers in the world have no idea what it is to build a secure system. So that's why you have a lot of security weaknesses. The last time I looked at this was 2019, but out of the top 24 undergraduate programs in computer science, only one of them required a security course as a core course. So that means tens of thousands of computer scientists or programmers, software engineers are graduating with never having learned anything about security. It's interesting, the one exception, UC San Diego. UC San Diego requires a security class for all computer science majors. USD, where I teach, does not. It does require it for embedded systems engineering majors, who are the engineers most likely to work on Internet of Things devices. It's an elective for CS majors. I don't understand why we haven't changed that yet. I keep pushing for it, but the fact is there's just so many courses that they can or should take that forcing people to take a computer science, a security course is still not on the table. And I imagine that's the case at all these other major universities. So that's my own pet peeve right now. Okay, back to the main program. As I said, vendors don't typically value security. They're interested in time to market, features, and cost. Security is viewed as a loss. It adds costs, provides little or no measurable return because customers can't judge whether it's really secure or not. And so there's no financial penalty, moreover, for having an unsecure system. There's no, you're not going to get, you have, remember the end user license agreement you click on in order to use a system? You just said, I'm not going to hold you responsible for any problems that occur. So therefore, the vendor has no financial penalty for selling unsecure products. But there is a penalty for trying to add security. It increases the cost of your development. As I said, your time to market, you might miss the window to get your system adopted. You have to reduce the features, right? The convenience. And also, if you make any security claims, you've just opened up your company to lawsuits when someone breaks into the system. So you make no claim whatsoever about the security of your system because that can hurt you. Whereas it doesn't hurt you if you make no claims. Why? Because customers can't, why did I say customers can't tell if something's secure? Because we don't have any way to measure it. We don't have trusted third parties to depend on. So if a customer doesn't know how to determine if a product is secure, they won't pay any extra money for it. And if you're a responsible vendor and you want to build a secure system, as I have repeated multiple times, you pay a financial penalty. So security is what's called a lemon market, where it's a race to the bottom because no one will pay extra for security, and therefore there's no advantage to providing it, and there's a disadvantage. So vendors basically don't bother. When does a vendor value security? Well, if it's a business requirement, if you have a big customer like the US government, and that requires a certain level of security in your system, they have a certification process where they determine whether your security claims are valid or not, you will build security into your system because it's worth it to you. Also, if there's a legal or regulatory requirement like the California Senate Bill 327, that requires all connected devices to have a reasonable security feature. Well, that reasonable security feature could be just as simple as a password, but a lot of Internet of Things devices didn't have passwords. But if you want to sell an Internet of Things device in California, you would at least have to add a password to your device. And that's something that only happened as of 2020. California is leading the country in this regard.
Mark, is there a website that some government issued that's all software applications? In other words, for example, there are many applications that connect to QuickBooks that are not improved by Intuit, but they're out there and they can be stealing data.
Mhm.
But I was wondering if there's like a website that can say, verify, hey, this software is legit. You know, they're not going to be stealing data and things like that.
No, there's
No?
no such. I mean, even Google, look at the
Uh-huh.
Google Play Store. People, developers put their apps in the Google Play Store. Google scans them for
Mhm.
malware. Well, every week we read about, oh, new malware discovered in apps on the Google Play Store.
Hmm.
Because the attackers figured out a way to bypass the checks. They basically lie low and they say, oh, my software is running inside the Google test environment. I'm not going to do anything bad. And then when it's installed, it'll peek its head out and go, oh, I'm not in the Google test environment. I'm going to start doing bad stuff. So it's a very difficult problem to solve. And there's so many applications out there. There's just no way that the government is going to be able to create a website. Now, just as Google has a Play Store and Apple has their App Store, Microsoft has an App Store where they verify software. Vendors are trying to create this kind of environment where they validate software, and that gets rid of a lot of problems. It's just not perfect. It doesn't get rid of everything because the bad guys up their game, the defenders up their game, and the bad guys up their game, and we have this endless cycle.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, so if you want to do an app and sell it through the Google Play Store or through Microsoft App Store or Apple, you have to meet their requirements. You can't do anything bad, as they define what bad is. So that's a business requirement then, or a legal or regulatory requirement, commercial, any regulatory requirement. So that will get software developers to focus on security, but there aren't very many of these laws. There's just not very many requirements for building security into systems. So why is that bad? Because in 2020, there was an estimated 31 billion Internet of Things devices out there. And that's doubling every year. I mean, if I drew you a graph, you could just see how rapid the increase is. And most of them are always on. We never turn them off. Do you have a Nest thermostat in your house, or an Alexa device or something like that? Those are always on. And most of them have very weak security. So, it's potentially a big risk. Here's some examples. Why should consumers care if there's bad security in their Internet of Things device? Well, here is from 2019. Somebody hacked a smart home in a couple in Milwaukee, played music from their video system at high volume, was talking to them via the camera in their kitchen, was able to change the temperature on the thermostat in their house. So basically took over their smart home. So if you're a consumer with Internet of Things devices in your home, like why would you want a smart refrigerator, for example, but Samsung sells them? Be concerned and follow all the instructions about secure configuration to avoid something like this. Have good passwords, have two-factor authentication, a firewall, all these things that are recommended by the vendors. Why does it matter to the internet as a whole? Well, when an attacker can take over Internet of Things devices, they can create something called a botnet or a robot network. And they can use these computers on the internet to mount attacks. So, or they can send spam email, or they could spy. For example, if you have a smart camera in your house, then someone could take it over surreptitiously and spy on what's happening in your house or in your business. Or they can sell these botnets. That's crime as a service is a real thing. And the people who've created a botnet will rent them out for sending spam or launching denial of service attacks and so forth. In 2016, the most well-known of these denial of service attacks happened, called the Mirai botnet. Attackers found weaknesses in IP-based cameras and home routers and launched an attack on infrastructure, internet infrastructure, mostly on the East Coast. And most of the internet was inaccessible for quite a while on the East Coast due to this attack. So 2016 was a wake-up call for the Internet of Things. That's when a lot of that created visibility into the vulnerability on the Internet of Things. So since 2016, as I'll discuss in a little bit, we've started to make more efforts to secure the Internet of Things. So why does the Internet of Things unsecurity matter in terms of critical infrastructure? Well, it's everywhere. Road transportation system, electrical power system, water supply, telecommunications, all of this, even healthcare, it's all based on Internet of Things devices. If somebody could take it down, and this is what I was referring to in terms of technology news, we're worried, the US is extremely vulnerable in this case. We're worried that that unfriendly powers have burrowed into our networks, are laying low. They've got software and they're just waiting for a time when it's needed. So for example, if God forbid we ever go to a kinetic war with Russia over Ukraine, or if Russia was to attack a NATO ally, the potential exists that the Russians have already embedded a malware in our critical infrastructure, that they will press a button and take down the power grid, open up the dams, create flooding, do all this sort of thing. Now that would be tantamount, that would be an act of war. I mean, that would be something where we would respond. We're probably just as capable of doing this to the Russians as they are to us, but the potential exists, and our government is very concerned about this. Our Department of Homeland Defense is extremely worried about this. Here's an example of how a power grid attack could work. This was a proof of concept, not a real attack, but it was presented at a conference in 2018. And these researchers demonstrated how if we could, if this Internet of Things devices that are high wattage, like heaters, were taken over and created into a botnet, all you have to do is turn them all on. And you can cause power outages and potentially large-scale blackouts just by manipulating the power usage. So there's a big, this demonstrated the interdependency between vulnerable IoT devices and critical infrastructure. I don't have slides here on it, but we know the Russians took down big chunks of the infrastructure in Ukraine in 2017. We also know that Iran, for example, took down parts of the Turkish power grid as part of a underreported set of attacks in that we didn't hear about, but all over the world, these shenanigans are happening. So it's a real thing. What about hacking cars? Remember we talked about vulnerabilities in cars. Well, every new cars are all basically a network with devices hung off on the end of them. You know, the radio's on the network, the engine's on the network. It's all a big network in the car, and they have wireless communication. So we have lots of examples of cybersecurity incidents involving automobiles, an increasing number. Attackers have demonstrated, well, researchers have demonstrated the ability to gain entry or control engine speeds or brakes, or even the steering of these smart cars. I mean, Teslas have not necessarily a physical steering column. They have like a fly-by-wire system. So cars are Internet of Things devices, and until recently, there haven't been a lot of security paid. People didn't pay a lot of attention to doing security right on cars. So what happens when we have autonomous cars? My nephew, he's a test driver for Cruise, which is GM's autonomous car division. He drives around San Francisco. He spends the whole day with his hands hovering above the steering wheel, waiting for something bad to happen. Usually nothing does. So, but recently the Department of Transportation just said, oh yes, when you have a smart car that passes certification, you do not need any way for humans to control it. You don't need a steering wheel in them. So we're on the verge of autonomous cars that are totally uncontrollable by humans. We already have something called autonomous cargo ships. It's like, why send a crew out with this giant ship when all you have to do is point the ship in the right direction and let a robot steer it using GPS. And those exist now, and they're still waiting for, a lot of governments are leery of that, and rightfully so, because we know how to spoof GPS. We have lots of demonstrations. We believe it's the Russians spoofing GPS in the Baltic Sea. So if you can spoof the sensors that the autonomous ship uses, you can steer it into anything. You can have it crash into anything. Autonomous airplanes. Here's a picture of a real autonomous airplane that's still a research project. So what happens if someone can hack autonomous airplanes and they can crash them into anything they want? So this is, you know, security in these autonomous devices, network-enabled devices, is like so major. I mean, we could have such terrible loss of life. Luckily, we haven't had that yet, but it's very possible. So let's say you want to buy an Internet of Things device that's secure. How do you know if it's secure? How do you choose? What criteria can you possibly use to know if it's secure or not? And if a vendor says it's secure, I say most of them won't bother, but if they claim it's secure, how can you know how can you trust them? How can you believe them? Remember, companies don't have a real financial incentive to build security into their products. And it's a lemons market, we said, because customers have no way to know if something's secure, and therefore that drives security out of the market. So, and if you're a responsible vendor and you don't want to sell something that's unsecure, you pay a penalty. So that's why we're in the state we're in. Security is ignored, and our society as a whole suffers. When this happens in other areas, the government steps in, or private organizations will step in to forestall government intervention. For example, how do you know if your electrical devices are safe? Well, we have something called underwriters labs, right? Which is actually not government, it's private, but it's there to determine whether a product meets certain minimum standards for safety. Can we do that for cybersecurity? If we do, how would we define what the minimum floor is for cybersecurity, and what standards would we use to judge whether a system is secure or not? We know what the vulnerabilities are. This is an organization called the Open Web Application Security. I forget what the P stands for. I always forget. Not process, not program. Project. Open Web Application Security Project. It's a private organization. They have chapters in many cities, including a chapter in San Diego. And they're focused, it's a bunch of software developers who focus on security. And so they've come up with this top 10 list of Internet of Things vulnerabilities. And the last time I saw that list was 2018. They probably have an updated one now, including weak, guessable, or hard-coded passwords, insecure network services, lots of other standard computer security things that we've known about for years. that Internet of Things are especially prone to. And if we could fix these things, the low-hanging fruit, we could make our Internet of Things devices much more secure. But we don't have a set of baseline security features, even though we know what the problems are. However, after the Mariah attack in 2016, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US and ETSI, which is European Technical Standards Institute in Europe, they've started to create standards for Internet of Things devices. NIST hasn't gotten very far yet because there's a lot of pushback from vendors. Also, there's a broad disagreement as to what the risk is, how bad the risk is, how much money do we need to spend to make our devices secure. And if people say, well, it's really low risk, not really going to hurt anyone, they don't want to spend any money. And if they say, well, no, it's a high risk, you want to spend more money. So how do you come up with a minimum set of standards that every device has to meet? So they come out with their draft reports, which are open for public comments and public review. And the goal was, when they first started this project, to identify a set of core security features that everybody could agree on, and then outline basic standards and practices, best practices for developing systems. So here's the set of core features that NIST identified, including an ability to update the software, what a secure configuration is, and so forth. I'm not going to dwell on these details because we're running out of time, and unless you're in the field, it may not interest you that much. But NIST is just starting out. It's a core baseline of security features. Lots of disagreement among my peers, my colleagues, as to whether they really make a system secure or not. Even in the document that NIST published, it says, this is, we encourage you to use this as a starting point. This is not the be-all end-all of security. And if you're interested in what NIST program, the current state of the program, here's a link to the NIST website that you can see what the latest, how far they've gotten since 2019. In Europe, they have a standard for consumer Internet of Things, not for industrial devices, but for consumer devices, explicitly for children's toys, baby monitors, smoke detectors, smart cameras, and many other things like that. They don't cover healthcare, they don't cover manufacturing, they don't cover industrial applications, because the manufacturers had a lot of pushback. Say, we know what's best, we don't want to follow your standards. So they said, okay, we're just going to focus on consumer standards. And they have many of the same things that were identified by NIST and by OWASP. For example, the first thing here is no universal default passwords, which was #1 on the OWASP list. So there's broad agreement as to what we need to do. But these are not laws. These standards are not required. No company is required to satisfy these standards. There's no certifying agency that says a vendor has. ETSI says flat out, it's intended to provide a basis for future certification schemes. So companies are not required to do it. There's been laws proposed in the Congress, US Congress, to require security in Internet of Things devices. They've gotten nowhere. Somewhere it said, GovTrack said there's only a 3% chance of enacting such a law. So because industry says we don't want to do it, and the politicians listen to them. But California, as I said, California's law is the first of its kind. It's kind of a trivial thing. Provide at least a password to protect people's data on devices. That's the first of its kind. So if you want to do business in California, California is a huge market, right? The 5th largest market in the world. You're gonna have to follow that law, and therefore you're not gonna make something just for California and different for the rest of the world. So California's forced manufacturers to add some trivial basic level of security into devices, and hopefully more of these laws are coming. So to summarize, there are 31 billion Internet of Things devices in 2020, and there's double that now, or maybe quadruple that now. Lives are at stake if we don't get security right. We've just barely scratched the surface in terms of what hackers can do. But devices aren't secure, and vendors don't have much of an incentive to add security to them. We have real difficulty even agreeing on what it means for an Internet of Things device to be secure. We got to solve that problem first before we can actually build the security in. And until we do, there won't be any regulation, or very little, that will make these secure. So that's it. If you have any additional questions, I am at your service.
Ooh,
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. I do have a question. Okay. So in my business, imagine podcasting. The thing that concerns me the most is there's all these apps showing up all over the place. And probably the one that is most well known is a program called Descript, which basically will take an audio and transcribe it. And it does a whole lot more. So they just, all these apps, there's all these tools that keep popping up all over the place, and they're all pretty much web-based. But, you know, it just, is there not any question I can actually ask one of these companies that have one of these applications to find out how secure they might be?
You can, okay, the short answer is not really. You want their feature. They provide a good service for you, right? It must be a good transcription process that they have, that, and it's the industry standard, and you all, you know, you want to use it, and it's the best.
Yep.
So you just have to trust them, right? We all have to trust them. If you use Microsoft Exchange Server for email in your company, they had a big bug just a couple of years ago, or was it last year, when the same time that the ransomware took over Scripps hospitals, there was a big bug came out that was discovered in the Microsoft Exchange email server, and that was being exploited all over the world.
So the best thing to do is really make sure you've locked down your own system.
Lock down your own system as much as possible. You can ask a vendor, what do you do in terms of security? Please tell me that you at least pay attention to it. Are there any standards you follow? And if they do, that at least they're paying attention, if you can believe them. Although I've had vendors lie to my face about how they train their engineers in security, and they have quality assurance people who are trained in security. And I say, okay, here's a trivial bug I found in your website. Just a trivial bug. It's the stupidest bug that I've seen over and over again and for years. And you guys didn't detect it. Was it your developers were bad? Your testing was bad, or both? And so they lied. They clearly have no real no training for their engineers, no for their testers. So you can ask, but you just depend on them to meet some certain standards, and you can ask them what standards do they meet. But end of the day, even if they say, well, we don't give out that information, you're still going to use their product because you want it to do what it does.
Yeah.
So, but I will say, install security patches as soon as they're available. The number of attacks that are based on successful attacks based on vulnerabilities that we've known about for years, because people that happens all the time, is ridiculous, because people haven't bothered to install security patches. And it used to be really difficult to install patches. For example, your home router would have a bug, and how many people know how to update the software in their home router? Virtually nobody, and that includes security experts. They would totally forget about them. So now most of these home routers that have been sold recently do self-updates. I have a Google Mesh system in my house, and Google has a large security group, and they don't get a lot of respect within Google, but I know some people who work there. But,
yeah, I have AT&T, and I tried to check to see if I could update the BIOS on the router, but it's an AT&T. They won't even let me in.
Yeah, so
they won't let me to do anything at all. So I'm at their, okay, fine, you guys know what you're doing, right?
Well, you have to hope. It's a large company. They do pay attention to security. It would be bad for business if suddenly it was announced, major flaw discovered in AT&T routers. Everyone who has them has been hacked. That would lose them a lot of business. So it's, they have a business interest in making it secure, but they make mistakes all the time. Remember, what was it? What's that? Experian, right? What year was that? That was just a few years ago. Experian, they have a large security group. Supposedly they pay attention to patching. Well, there was a major subsystem that they didn't patch. The patch was available, and months went by and they never installed that patch, and that's why they were hacked. So LinkedIn, business social networking. A few years ago, all the passwords on their site were stolen. And it turned out they didn't store the password securely. Basic security hygiene, they didn't do it. So all the passwords for people on LinkedIn, stolen.
You're pretty fired up about this, Mark.
Bugs the hell out of me. I can't go to conferences anymore about the latest hacks. Like, You've heard of DEF CON in Vegas every
Sure.
summer. It's a collection of hackers. They all get together and they talk about all the cool ways they broke into a system. It's like, I can't listen. It's like everyone's making the same mistakes over and over and over again. We've known how to solve these problems and we just don't. So this is why I like to give talks like this, because I get to proselytize.
Yeah, no kidding. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Mark. What IoT devices do you have at home?
Well, I do have these Google Mesh in my house, but it's as secure as it can
For
be.
the network, yeah.
And I just bought a Google camera because I have more faith in Google's security than I have in other types of devices. Also, I've had some porch pirates here, and I wanted to set up a security camera. I do not have any smart devices intentionally. I do have a Fire Stick on my TV where I could say, Alexa, do something, but I don't use it. I've disabled the feature as much as I can. I don't use my smart TV features. I use only the plugin, like the Fire Stick or the Google Chrome device or Roku, because I know that they do frequent automatic patching. Whereas my TV, LG or Samsung or whatever the TV, they don't. So I won't use their built-in applications. I have a smartphone, but I don't do any banking on it. When I install software on my home computer, what I remember, because I do make mistakes, I'll install it on a virtual machine and try it out first before I'll put it on my main computer. So I've been burned. And also, it's the same reason my wife, who's a microbiologist, continues to wear a mask, even though lots of people around us have declared the pandemic to be over, because she knows a lot more about it than I do. And same thing when it comes to computers. I know a lot more about the potential problems than other people do. And so I tend to be more safe. But yeah, I don't have a smart home, for example, and I refuse to have a smart home. So most of the things I don't see the need for them, but also I'm too aware of what the vulnerabilities are. So they're great. They're convenient. Oh, I can have an app on my phone and I can check it from anywhere. And it's like, I've increased the attack surface by 100% by having, they could attack the cloud, they could attack my phone, they could attack the devices in my house. So yeah, so I minimize my attack surface, but I try to keep all the modern conveniences at the same time.
All right, great. Mark, thank you very, very much for being here.
This was
My
great.
pleasure.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
inviting me. And if you have any questions, I posted my email address in chat.
Okay.
So feel free to reach out. Happy to answer questions if you ever have one. And also, if you know of any students who are thinking of careers in cybersecurity, just make a pitch for USD. We have a undergraduate program called 4+1, which means if you get a computer science degree at USD and follow the program of study that's laid out, in 4 years you get your CS bachelor's degree, and in 1 additional year you can get a master's in cybersecurity engineering.
Wow.
Which is a unique program
and a lot of job security.
And a lot of job security. Employers are begging for extra.
Yep.
So and if someone already is in a field and wants to change careers, we have 2 online master's programs, one in cybersecurity operations and leadership, one in cybersecurity engineering, that you don't need necessarily an engineering background for operations and leadership. And if you're thinking of a career change, or if you know someone who is, they should look into these master's programs at USD. So there's my pitch.
Great. Well, once again, Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.